Today I'm talking with Lynn Carlson. Tara is a healing practitioner from the Spokane area using modalities like SLP, meditation, and integrative body work to help her clients, both adults and children. One of the modalities we're going to talk a lot about today is MNRI. And MNRI is a therapy that helps assess the individual and helps to understand their motor, emotional, and sensory needs as an individual, right? So a lot of times we'll hear the term spectrum, and a lot of times people get kind of pegged in the spectrum, but there's a lot of uniqueness to that individual. So we're going to really unpack what MNRI is, which leads to a bunch of very beautiful topics, mainly revolving around neurodivergence in some kind of aspect. The idea of consciousness comes up a lot today, the subconscious that we kind of revert back to, and how a conscious approach to the human being and meeting them where they're at instead of expecting them to meet us where we're at has helped a lot with the understanding of neurodivergence in general. This is an amazing conversation. I really am grateful for Tara and her wisdom and her knowledge and her ability to share this amazing modalities that she works with. Hope you get something out of the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. Anamkara is a gorgeous meditation and healing center, offering daily in-person and virtual services to help bring you back to the center of who you truly are. They serve through a collective of practitioners, healers, and teachers, offering daily meditation classes, one-on-one healing sessions, workshops, personal ceremonies, and private events, plus corporate and team training, all with mindfulness at the core. The center itself is located in the heart of downtown Spokane. Every part of it was built, designed, and curated for you to drop into your calm place. They have a large community space for daily meditation classes and workshops, as well as 2 one-on-one healing rooms, a community kitchen to gather for tea, plus a well-stocked apothecary for you to gather all of your self-care and ritual needs. Hannah Talbot, the owner and founder of Anamkara, dreamed of opening this space for years. It is her ultimate manifestation, and she cannot wait to share it with those in the Spokane community, but also through the virtual ethers, wherever you may be. Pop in for a class today. You can follow them on Instagram to book and stay up to date. Check out the website, the full schedule, meet the practitioners, and view all the offerings. Visit them at anamkarahealing.center. Anamkara, may you be nourished and ignited. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. When we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, Healing.com. AdamRealHealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Lynn Carlson. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm talking with Lynn Carlson. So Tara was introduced to me by an amazing human being that I reference a bunch on this show, Miss Hannah Talbot. So Hannah introduced myself to Tara and her partner, Rochelle, who you'll hear an interview with her either before or after this one. But so Tara is a practitioner in the Spokane area that is working with SLP. She's a meditation guide, integrative body worker. So a lot of different modalities that she's adding into what she offers. She's also the founder of the website Movement Medicine. So it's a way you can get in touch with her and see what kind of offerings that she has, the programs that she offers, the help in humanity that she offers. And also the co-host of a beautiful podcast called Illuminating the Pathways Home. So, and that's where Rochelle and Tara work together on this podcast to talk about different practitioners, different paths in healing. We all have a story, and that's one of my favorite things about this podcast is to hear people's stories, to hear people's journeys, how they got to where they're at, because we all have, something that we've unpacked in life. And what I personally found are the people that are in the healing arts of some sort generally have been through some big shit and have just found their way through and was like, hey, guess what? This helped me. I'm going to try to find ways to help people because this helped me so much. And that's, I think, where the true healing comes from, where we just open ourselves up, open our hearts up and say, hey, how can I help humanity? So Tara Lynn, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to talk with you and learn about your stuff because you do things that I've never heard of. You have acronyms that you practice, and I'm like, I don't know what those mean, and that's amazing. I love that. So first off, just thanks for being here. I appreciate you taking time out of your day and all that you do to share your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much, Adam. I'm so honored to be here. I still am kind of pinching myself that I'm on the same podcast as not only some of my dearest friends and mentors, but Yogi Brian.
I love that guy. That was a fun one.
Love that guy.
Anytime we can justify saying the word fuck in a meditation or in a peaceful setting, I'm all about that. I'm all about that life.
We take ourselves way too fucking seriously.
Amen.
Most of the time.
Amen. You know, one of my favorite things to do is, and just as like a guilty pleasure, just since we're talking about Yogi Brian, is I like looking through the comments on the posts that he makes, just to see how vehemently angry people get about what they call yoga and not yoga. And I love the evolution of healing arts. And yes, they all have a root somewhere, and that root is probably even deeper than we imagine, right? And so I understand there's that appropriation idea and there's that patriarchy idea, but also I believe in the evolution of things, right? The evolution of speech, the evolution of healing, the evolution of the modalities that we once used to not be able to know about because we were in different countries, different continents, and we couldn't communicate. Now we can, and we can see how maybe some ideas from Buddhism might mix with some ideas from Hinduism, might mix with some ideas from Western culture, right? Western healing medicines. And we find our ways to meld this stuff together into a package that kind of makes sense, you know? Might not make sense to the masses, but it's going to make sense to enough people that it can help. And that's where I'm at. How can we help?
Amen.
Yeah. So how did you get to where you're at? You've seemed like you've have an amazing journey behind you and also ahead of you. So kind of what led you to this just kind of healing idea for you?
Yeah. So SLP, I'll start with that just because that's kind of where a lot of this started. It stands for speech language pathology. So I'm a speech therapist by trade, by my schooling. Paid $65,000 for that lovely little certificate.
Oh yes. It ain't cheap.
It got me so much more than that. So, prior to kind of discovering that that's the path I wanted to take, I worked with a lot of autistic students, one in particular who I actually babysat him when I was 12 years old.
That's sweet.
Yeah. So I was like only double his age. I think he was 6 at the time, and he had so many behaviors that as somebody who's always been pretty hyperverbal, I've been very communicative. My mom always jokes that I was talking the minute I came out of her. So, being around this little boy who is wanting to interact by tickling and going on top of my head and like squeezing it and like literally trying to hug my head at times, and like my neck would hurt at the end of the day. I'd be like, what are you trying to tell me? So he was honestly my first kind of like, I want to understand and I want to help bridge this gap between communicating with you.
And you were 12 at this time?
I was 12. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I mean, and then it just led me to working in some of the high needs classrooms at my high school. You could take it as like an elective, just hang out with them and be like an aide in their classroom. And I met another speech therapist, and she was working with a lot of the AAC devices, which are like computerized verbal output devices that help children talk that can't have verbal means to do so. So, and I was just fascinated. The minute I met her, I was just enthralled. I was sold that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I kind of plugged planted that seed as early as I think I was like 14, 15. And I only looked back a couple times.
Yeah.
when I finally, so I went through school, discovered in grad school that I had ADHD myself. Or ADHD-like symptoms. I don't like giving myself too much of a label, but
yeah, appreciate that.
I mostly obtained that diagnosis so that I could get some accommodations in grad school. And I really developed this like advocacy side of myself. And so I became a practicing speech therapist in clinic settings. And I would always tell my supervisors and my bosses, I want to work with the high needs kids. I want to work with, basically, I want to just cherish them for a moment and take a moment to honor that they are difficult to work with for a lot of people who have not had that exposure to different ways that they communicate.
Yeah.
So, but I will say a lot of other speech therapists didn't want to necessarily work with those kids. So a lot of speech therapists were like, yes, please help me.
Right.
I don't know what I'm doing, So the only problem is that in traditional speech therapy, you are in a small room with a desk, 2 chairs, and your main goal is to get them to communicate with you in the way that we communicate.
So not meeting them where they're at, you're trying to force them into where we're at.
Right.
Gotcha.
And I mean, a lot of that has progressed, and we've come up with some really great models for play therapy, but it's still it's not taught in graduate school how to interact with students that don't communicate verbally or who communicate in so many other ways, behaviorally, with their body, with their noises. So I did that for about 6 years. I did that for, I guess, only 4 years before I found this clinic that practiced this very holistic style of therapy called MNRI, or Muzkatova's neurosensory motor reflex integration.
Muzkatova. All right. I was looking at that name today and I'm like, I'm going to butcher that. So I'm just going to use the acronym and I'm going to let you explain it.
Yes. No, the acronym is perfect because as soon as I say the whole name, people are like, what now?
Yeah. Did you just switch languages on me? Like, what's going on here?
So quick little background about amazing Svetlana Muzkatova. She's obviously Russian. She is a neurodevelopmental psychologist, specialist. So her story is really cool. Quick, just synopsis of it. Please. And how she founded MNRI there was a big train accident in, I think it was Poland. And a lot of the students on the train had special needs of some kind. And I think half of them didn't make it. So the other half were obviously severely traumatized.
Right.
So they were in this hospital. Physically, they were all fine, but emotionally and cognitively, they had all stopped speaking completely.
Wow.
Just completely stopped talking. So they tried occupational therapy, physical therapy, music therapy, animal therapy. They tried everything, and none of it was, these kids weren't even allowing anybody to really get close to them.
Wow.
They were so severely traumatized. So Dr. Svetlana Muzkatova came in, and she had been working with what was called brain gym, which is a lot of cross-lateral movements. And she knew all about the mirror neurons and had kind of integrated all of this with some research she had been doing on our reflex system, our automatic ability to be in the world. And I'll go into what reflexes are at some point.
Okay.
I don't want to get too deep, but anyways, she got in front of these kids and started doing some of these basic reflex patterns just through her mirror neurons. So she was just moving in these patterns. So one of them is Moro reflex, she was just moving her arms and legs out. Because again, these kids wouldn't let anyone touch them. Massage therapy, and none of that was working. Within a couple days, they were watching her and they were starting to interact with her. And within less than a week, they were speaking, communicating, and allowing her to get to some of the root of their trauma through actual touch on their body.
Yeah.
So ever since then, she's been working. This is her main research that she's been diving into, and they have a school that they're starting to certify people in this.
Okay.
We've been open for about a year or two, so wasn't around when I first learned this technique. But
nice.
Yeah. So I went to this clinic. Sorry, this is super long.
It's all good. We need to hear it. It's all good.
So I went to this clinic that was using this MNRI, and I started being able to interact with these students in such a more genuine way, especially my kids that were on the autism spectrum, were autistic. And I was getting interactions that sometimes they were verbal, but sometimes they were just turn taking. Things that they still weren't doing prior to me doing some of these exercises on them.
Yeah.
And my frustration with the field kind of dissolved. And I was like, this is it. This is the answer. And I just dove in. Worked there for a couple years before some changes in management happened. And ever since then, I've been using it pretty regularly now with adults as well as kids that I work with for speech therapy specifically. But I worked alongside mostly occupational therapists.
Okay.
So it was a very whole system. We were targeting sleep, eating, swallowing, play, just everyday activities through this MNRI technique.
Well, what is so with MNRI, I'm very intrigued by this, and I put a bracket around the reflexes. We'll get to that in a second. But what is okay, so what would an MNRI session look like? Whether it's, somebody you're brand new, somebody that you're meeting for the first time, or whether it's, somebody you've been working with for a little bit.
Yeah. So I've taken 6 different courses. Oral facial is one of the main ones I use a lot because our vagus nerve innervates in our face and is one of our major connections to help with our calming and our overall anxiety that a lot of people, just everyday stress that people tend to have different levels of resiliency to, right?
Yeah.
Based on the trauma that they've experienced. So the first thing I do is I ground them through a tactile protocol. I'll get them on my table. I don't ask a lot of questions.
Okay.
I don't need to know their story. I don't need to know their why. And I don't even want them thinking about it, because the whole purpose of this method is to take cognition out of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, these are reflexes that we're working with. We want them to stay reflexes. We never want them to feel like something that they have to think about.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
it's not like ask a question, let me think about it and give you an answer. It's like just immediate response. Like, what's your reflexive response from just this thing, this situation, this experience, whatever it is.
And it's through the body. So what a reflex is let's back up a little bit. So a reflex is a nerve plexus, or a nerve network. Okay. And it requires a specific sensory stimulus. So anything sensory, auditory, touch, smell, sight, right? To demonstrate, and it poses a motor pattern. So hence the neurosensory motor, right? So think about when you place your hand on a hot stove and you move it away, right?
Yeah.
The sensory is the heat,
Mm-hmm.
and the motor action is moving it away.
Gotcha.
Do you actually, you don't think about that, right? It's an automatic response that your body does.
Okay. Is that like safety response? Like if you're about to fall over, your body's like, no, let's get back here.
Yes.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So, when we're born, our reflex system is under complete automaticity, right?
Okay.
So our stomach gives us a sensory feeling that we're hungry, we cry. That's kind of a more abstract one, but it's still a reflex,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of my favorite reflexes is that like in primitive times when we were like actually had real danger in our lives on a daily basis, our moral reflex, our breathing reflex, will allow us to hold our breath. Like, let's say we were holding on to mom because we were running from a saber-toothed tiger.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be grabbing onto her thanks to a reflex to hold on because she's running. She needs her arms.
Right.
We're sensing the adrenaline, the cortisol. And let's say she needs to put you down to divert the saber-toothed tiger.
Mm-hmm.
You would stop breathing as soon as she placed you down so that the saber-toothed tiger wouldn't hear you.
Oh.
And then you would start crying as soon as you sensed the danger was gone.
Interesting.
So that she could come and find you.
Wow.
So that's all reflexive.
Wow.
All of that is automatic, and it's in our safety system so that we keep ourselves safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So as we age, by about toddlerhood, our reflexes integrate and become a network of functioning postural, so how we stand up, and movement-based reactions.
Okay.
So the function of these reflexes is to hold us up against gravity and to allow for emotional and cognitive maturation.
Okay.
So they say that how we respond to our first major trauma in life is how we will respond to trauma the rest of our lives. That's thanks to our reflex system.
That's tough to think about, when we're developing that as toddlers, as infants, and then, and I get that. I totally understand that, because once I finally realized that, there was a toddler driving this at the time 38-year-old meat suit, and I'm like, oh my God, this whole time? Like, no, go play with some toys, man. Let me try to figure this out for a little bit, That's so interesting to think about, like how impactful those years are on our adult life.
Yes. Yes. And that makes me think of another one of my favorite reflexes, which you kind of mentioned earlier, which is developed around toddlerhood, and it's for setting boundaries. And it also protects our frontal lobe. So if we were to fall, we would catch ourselves with our two hands, right?
Right.
And we don't think about it. But we also use that reflex when somebody isn't listening to our boundaries. So there's like this really cute little video, I can never find it, but of these two 2-year-olds the one 2-year-old is trying to hug the other one, and the other one is like, no. And she keeps saying no, and she keeps saying no, and he keeps going in. And then he goes in she goes in and just pushes him.
Okay.
Nobody intervenes. No adults, no overbearing helicopter parents are like, oh my God, go say sorry, right?
Yeah, right.
The boy is just fine. And what does he do? He grabs her hand instead. In that moment, boundaries, hand supporting reflex has been integrated.
And there's
killer boundaries.
Yeah, and there's a beauty in that for me, because especially at that young age, when that example just you gave, there's not all those built up stories that we have in our head. They're so young. It's like, oh, okay, you pushed me. I don't have to take that personally, right? I don't have this story in my head of how I don't think good about myself, or I think people might view me. I approach this, I get pushed away. I'm like, oh shit, I overstepped a boundary. Let me just reach out this loving hand and say, hey, it's all good. Like I just wanted to say hi. I just didn't know that was an aggressive way to say hi. You
Yeah.
know, that's beautiful. Like, 'cause there's this therapist that I follow. I'm pretty sure it's Nicole LePera that put this, that said this, but basically it's the idea that toddlers are the most well-adjusted, emotional human beings in the world because they will always let you know exactly how they feel. They're not going to hide that shit. I am happy. Hey, guess what? Now I'm pissed. Hey, guess what? I'm tired. I want some food. I need to go outside and run. Right? There's no
Yeah.
hiding that stuff. It's all right there on the sleeve because people haven't pushed it down yet and said no. You know, like you were saying, you know, we have this intuitiveness with our kids, right? Go give your grandmother a kiss. I don't care if you don't feel like it. Go give your grandmother a kiss. Go hug your uncle. Go say hi to that person over there. And, you know, those kids are like, no, like, I don't want to. And you see the face and the look, but you're like, no. Deny your intuition. Sorry, ignore it, right? Do what the adult says and just go over there. And so, like, at that young age, we're already teaching kids not to listen to their intuitions because we know better because we're the adults. You don't have an imaginary friend, go play outside, right? But now we can embrace that in this way and embrace the idea that the kid is fucking smart. The kid has intuition. The kid's intuition is probably way stronger than any adult's intuition because we haven't hindered their intuition yet. So, like, listening to the kid, listening to what the kid has to say, and, like, being a kid ourselves. That's one of the things I love about having kids is I don't have to have an excuse to play and watch kids' movies. Like, I have kids. I'm going to watch cartoons. It's great. I'm an adult. Fucking let's do it, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that intuition is what keeps them safe.
Mm-hmm.
And they're so connected to that without needing to understand it, right? Like they don't need to understand the whys as to why they don't want to go hug grandpa or whatever,
Right.
Or sit on his lap. They just know that this is how I need to keep myself safe right now.
Right.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what reflexes do for us is they keep us safe.
Wow. So with your MNRI therapies, what kind of success are you seeing, you know, with the clients that you're working with? What kind of progress are they making?
Yeah. So one of the biggest successes that I've been seeing, especially lately, is honestly what you said is trusting their intuition with a little bit more compassion and understanding, because we are humans with these huge brains of ours that we think can control everything.
Right.
And fortunately, we do all have egos, which are really just our frontal lobes.
Yeah.
And it's helpful to understand what the purpose of some of these safety mechanisms are so that we can continue to validate them and continue to thank them and continue to be curious about where they came from. Like, why is it that I have a hard time setting boundaries? Maybe I fell really hard when I was a kid. Maybe I broke my arm falling forward.
Yeah.
Maybe it had to do with a situation when I was, in my 20s, and maybe it was an emotional boundary that got, continuously beaten down.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest success I would say is leaning into that and trusting our body to do what it's meant to do.
That's a big statement. That's a big statement. And I love it because I'll speak personally. I developed a lot of mistrust with my body because I never was taught that my body was part of me. I was taught that the body was just a vessel to get me from here to there, right? The meat suit I referenced earlier. And so, once we find out like that my body's smarter than my head, right? It's constantly sending me messages that I'm not listening to, that I haven't been listening to, I should say. But once you start to dial in to your personal body, and not just like the physical exterior skin and touch and all that stuff that we have, but like, why did your belly just gurgle, right? Why did all of a sudden your left toe just be like, brunk? It's like there's these things that if we pay attention and we start to notice the signs in our own bodies, we can start to put some of this stuff together and understand what our intuition is telling us and what is kind of impacting us, because we can't always see what's around us. There's things that animals can see that we can't see, right? We know that for a fact. So taking that idea and layering it into an energetics world, when I feel like my mom passed away in September, right? My mom and I had a beautiful relationship. I love her to death. You know, she's an amazing woman, and I still feel her so much when I'm with, now. To the point that, there's one thing my mom used to do, because she was in Texas, I'm in Washington, so thousands of miles away. When we get to see each other, big hug, big love, and I have a beard, she'd take her little hands and little fingers and grab my little whiskers in the bottom of my chin, and she'd say, like, my Adam, there's my Adam. And I feel that in my meditations now, like I'll sit there and I'll have this, like, this humanistic, grief moment of like, man, I fucking miss my mom. But I'll feel that little tickle on the bottom of my chin, and I can rationalize that and be like, oh, that was weird. That was an odd way that the wind just blew in. There's no windows open. That's just weird. Or I can lean into the fact that, like, my intuition just told me that my mom is around me at all times. And that's the way that it's going to show it, by brushing the bottom of my chin to show that my mom loves me and she'll always be with me. Right. And again, I can rationalize that away, or I can accept the magic that is and just embrace that and lean into that. And
thank it.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a reason that came up, right? My mom's idea of my mom, the love that my mom had for me, came up for a reason, whether it was to take me out of the depressive moment I was in or to show me that she'll always be there. It's the human side of me misses my mom immensely. The spiritual side of me is like, hey, mom, every single day. Right. So it's just that balance of, that mystic and the practical and mystical. We got to find that balance. If I just live in the mystical world and feel my mom's energies all the time, then maybe I wouldn't be able to have the practice that I have and help people in the way that I am, because I'm living too much in this mystical world. So combining that physicality of the world and saying, okay, so I have a physical being, I have a physical house I need to take care of, and I have this energetic side of me that I'm exploring. How do I push those together into a place where I can embrace both?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you about just working with adults and kids with different levels of neurodivergence. And it's funny because we use the word spectrum, and I know that that's just a word out there, and I don't think, is that the correct word to use now, or it kind of
it's so the clinical term in the DSM, I think we're in 6.
Okay.
Is autism spectrum disorder.
Autism spectrum disorder. Okay.
But we call it ASD. But if you talk to most autistic adults, they prefer that you don't refer them to a person with autism, which is what I was taught, is person first language. They're autistic. Okay. I'm an autistic adult. That is who I am, and it is a big part of me. So I don't need you to use person first language.
Love that.
And I used to say people on the spectrum, that's kind of outdated now too, with now more autistic adults kind of speaking out and being able to communicate their preferences.
Yeah. And that's just a quick tangent on that too, because you mentioned the what is it? The DSM? Is that the?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I read not too long ago that there was a autistic activist group, that were working to get autism removed from the DSM, because it's not that there's something wrong. This is the way that they're living their life. It's like if you put colorblindness in the DSM, right? Yeah. A colorblind person, that's the way they're born. There's nothing wrong with them. They're blue as my red. Am I going to tell them that that's red? No, hell no. That's blue to them, right? There's no reason that's wrong in their head, right? So why would I enforce my way that I view life into them, right? And so that's why I love that idea of this, like, we're born this way for a reason. There's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just misunderstood. And that's why I love the fact that word spectrum is kind of being removed a little bit, because if you think about it, humanity is on a spectrum.
I was just going to say, we're all on a spectrum.
We're all on a spectrum, exactly, right? And it's not like because I'm a quote-unquote healthy adult and you're a quote-unquote healthy adult that we share the same mindset, we share the same abilities, we share the same understanding of cognitive responses, all this shit, right? We're on a spectrum, right? Yeah. So it's like take that word out of it. Like, we're all just here doing shit, right? We're just trying to figure out how humanity is not normal. Like, we've tried to have this guise of humanity being normal and this normalcy. Okay, we're all going to act a similar way. We're all going to dress a similar way. We have similar values and morals and shit, right? But the way we approach that humanity is going to be very different. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with this, with a rise in the understanding of neurodivergence. So I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, because there is that wide range of abilities with people that have neurodivergence, do people that have that are neurodivergent in some kind of way, do they have input in some of this treatment? Like, are there like people like out there that because I'm assuming, because what I know about some like high functioning neurodivergent people, they are super hyper focused, and there's abilities that they can focus on that nobody else can. And with that ability, the development that comes from those ideas is insane in a beautiful way. And so are there adults or even kids that are helping that have neurodivergence in some kind of way with these kind of treatments that are coming out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, it's still challenging for me at times coming from a somewhat medical background. I also, one of my best friends and family members is in MD school to become a child psychiatrist, psychologist. She's incredible. And so I want to advocate for that side of it as well. So I will just say one of the most challenging parts is really that the levels of functioning in a day-to-day sense are highly impacted if you can't communicate verbally.
Okay.
Right? Or if you can't go outside without some type of compensation.
Like noise canceling headphones or...
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Or even, the autistic community, to my understanding, and I don't want to speak for them, but to my understanding, they've successfully come up with some really beautiful compensations for how to live day to day. And yet still we have a lot of kids and adults, kids who become adults, who wouldn't be able to live without a non-autistic adult.
Yeah.
Because of their specific needs and because of those, some of those hyper focuses that they have, as you can imagine, that's a lot of energy put towards that hyper focus.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful and amazing that they have all this knowledge in this one area that is a hallmark of autism, is restricted and repetitive behaviors. So it's very restricted and they do it over and over and over, right? And what we understand about the brain from the perspective that I have on MNRI and the reflexes is that restriction and repetition gets them into a loop that is really difficult to get out of.
Yep. Okay.
So it often mirrors an OCD like compulsion.
Yep. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And so our brain connects right to left. That's the corpus callosum, right? Connects from right to left. So if you'll notice, a lot of autistic children, they will sometimes rock forward and back. You almost never will see them rock side to side.
Yeah.
Almost never. And that's because they're in a loop that their body can't get them out of because it's a non-functional loop. Front to back isn't really functional.
Right.
It doesn't connect the pathways. So to kind of answer your question, compensations have been developed and they've been great, but we're still not understanding a lot of there's still so much money being poured into the research for what causes autism.
Right.
And I'll tell you right now, I don't know one single thing that causes autism.
Right.
But combined, it's environmental, it is genetic, it is mostly those two, environmental and genetic.
Okay.
And with our changing world, the changing chemicals that are being put into foods, God forbid I say vaccinations, but and how our immune system responds to those things when they're compounded.
Right. Right.
And again, I just want to really stress a lot of this is controversial, and I understand that, and I understand autistic adults all are going to have kind of a different say, just like typical uh, uh, neurotypical adults.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's got to be tough, especially as you get older in with neurodivergence and start to get an understanding of it, and especially if you're in the area where you can communicate in some kind of way, and I think that's why we see such a big push into the understanding of autism, or the understanding of this as being, this is the way we're born. Right. There's, like you said, there's a lot of environmental things. And I appreciate you bringing up vaccines and environmental and all that stuff, because these are all like, we can't count anything out yet. There's no hard data that says, yes, this causes this, or no, it doesn't. Right. So it's an open conversation. And the more we can have open conversations, the more we can find the right answer, instead of somebody being triggered by the word vaccine and be like, no, you're fucking wrong. It's like, no, and who knows, right? I don't know you're wrong. I don't know I'm right, one way or the other, right? Because we're all just figuring this out. Nobody has the answers. So when we speak in the absolutes, that's where I start to get a little, like, personally little kind of put back, because it's like, we can't have absolutes, right? We don't know enough to have an absolute, right? So, but there was something that you mentioned that was very interesting to me, because I love the brain. I love figuring out the brain. I'm by no means am I a doctor or have any like medical training in that. I just love to like read books about cognitive responses and all this different stuff, right? But, one of the things I know about what I've read about the brain is that we love patterns, right? We love patterns. And so to our detriment, we love patterns, right? Now, with that idea that the brain works in that pattern, and you talking about how, the kid, the example you had of the kid rocking forward and back, get in that loop of that's not, benefiting the body. When we rock left and right, we can kind of balance the body out. Sometimes it's grounding if you're sitting down, but that forward and back, it's more precarious, right? Are we falling back? Are we falling forward? Yep. So is it, something where the brain gets stuck in that pattern making, kind of loop, and it's like, okay, so we're just doing this, right? Now I'm just going to pat my head for the next 10 minutes until somebody tells me to stop, because I'm in this pattern that this is just what my brain is doing right now. So is there some kind of link between that pattern making part of the brain and some of the, the experiences that neurodivergence, adults and kids have?
Yeah. Yeah. So, to kind of bring it back to my understanding of the reflex system. Mm-hmm. So your frontal lobe is what's responsible for cognition, higher level thinking, like planning, initiating. It's what makes us able to really function in society, mm-hmm. really, and have conversation and repair the conversations, have, be polite, have some awareness of what we are and aren't doing.
Right.
And so that's in the front of our brain. And then in the back of our brain is our brainstem, which is responsible for keeping us safe. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you can imagine, I know for me, this has been a huge theme in my life of wanting to trust my body, mm-hmm. but also I have this brain that's really smart and that knows if I make a list of all the reasons why I'm safe, I'm safe.
Right.
Right. But my brainstem is telling me I'm not safe, but I can make that list and I can come back. But my brainstem is telling me that my heart rate needs to go up. Right. Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, moving forward and back is almost getting your body into an argument with itself.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So, because whenever you lean forward, you're using more of your frontal lobe.
Okay.
That's just what your body is being triggered to do. When you lean more backwards, you're going to call upon your brainstem more.
Okay.
Also for protection of, if I fall backwards, I will die. If
right.
you fall backwards, you will hit the part of your brain that is crucial for breathing. So
yeah, so don't do that. We're gonna reflex. We're gonna make sure we have reflexes to not do that.
Exactly.
Definitely. Right
exactly.
on. Right on. So, you mentioned something just now about like societal training, right? Like manners and conversational cues and stuff like that. There's a gentleman that I follow named Dr. Zach Bush. I don't know if that name sounds familiar. Right. Love Zach Bush. Right. Got just
I've listened to like every podcast that he's been a guest on.
Yep. I really appreciate his message and the way he approaches the doctoring, right? It's very different than what I've heard, and I just love it. But he talks a lot about autism and neurodivergence in a few of the talks that I've heard. And one of the things that he said really kind of, it really stuck with me. And by no means do I have any like basis of like medical experience or expertise or anything like that. But, we hear these ideas and sometimes they just kind of like stick with us, right? And so he was talking about autism and he was like, okay, so if you look at the rise of neurodivergence that's been happening in the world for the past, 20 years or so, he's like, one of the things we look at is, in a beautiful way, these kids can't be trained. They can't be trained on how to look, how to act, how to be polite, how to do all this stuff, like in the way that we're trying to train and pretty much, kind of get humanity on the same page, right? And, there might have been, there's good ideas behind that, right? I understand that we've come a long way in humanity, and maybe we're at a place in humanity now where society is by no means are we set up, right? But we're not at war all the time, right? We're able to live in, community without having a lot of skirmishes, right? We still have a lot of infighting as far as like gender equality and race equality goes, but we're in, what people call the most peaceful time in this planet, right? There's not a lot of wars. There's not a lot of shit going on. So are we finally in a place to where we can explore humanity in a little deeper way and get out of this kind of pattern that we've tried to put humanity in, right? So, I mean, look at let's take the bikers, right? Motorcyclists, right? So we have humanity. We have this economy of humanity of like, we're all looking similar. We're all working towards similar goals. We have jobs that are, putting food on, we have insurance, all this bullshit. And then you have this out group of, let's take the bikers that are like, fuck that. I don't want to have a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to have this. I don't want to have insurance. I don't want to have a 401k. I'm going to ride my bike. And so now like the bikers got pushed in the outskirts, right? They're not part of like that inner circle of humanity. And so now they've been outlawed and they've been doing all this stuff, right? Living the life that they've chosen to live. Now, that same kind of idea with autism, these kids that are living the life they want to live, and they don't want to be trained on to say please and thank you, go sit on grandpa's lap, look at me in the eyes, all these things that we kind of demand of humanity now. Now there's this group of humans being birthed into this world that are like, I don't want to play that game. I'm sorry, you're going to play my game.
Yep.
I fucking love that.
I do too. I just got chills just listening to you talk about that. I even got I feel emotional just because so much of why I believe so much in what I do is because for so long I was being asked to quote unquote train these students, these kids, to do something that they could give 5 fucks about. And it was like, why do I want them to do this so bad? And, I would tell myself like, oh, so they can have conversations, so they can tell their mom, I love you. So they can, grow up and have a romantic relationship. What if they don't want any of those things?
100%.
What if their romantic relationship is with their repetitive and restricted behavior? What if that is enough for their heart and soul? Why are we thinking that like we're superior and we know the best, what's best for these individuals just because that's what's best for us?
And is it even what's best for us? We have 50% plus divorce rate, right? People hate their fucking jobs with passions, right? Not even just like, oh, I got to go to work today. It's like people kill themselves because they have to go to work at a job they fucking hate. Whether it's a law enforcement person, a teacher, like there's all these things that we've just accepted as, well, I guess this is part of life now, right? I get to a certain age and I got to get a 50, 60 hour fucking week job, pay everything that I make, I give back, right? I don't have nobody there. That's not a balanced life, right? And so if it takes a group of adults or humans to come into this world that have a different outlook, that have a different ability than us, that not disability, but a different ability than us, to see and to show us that we're living a fucking lie, because now like I can't make that child do what I do. Yeah. I have to be changing. I have to be willing to change so I can meet that child or that human where they're at, not expecting them to meet me where I'm at. So maybe that's the message for humanity right now, is to soften our ego as a group to say, meet me where I'm at because I'm too busy and I'm too set up to meet you where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And it it's really hard because it's hard to see so many autistic individuals have these really high safety responses. They have high stress responses, right, to their environment. And part of that is because their vagus nerve isn't functioning the same as ours. I mean, truly, from a very primitive level, when someone is not matching what I'm doing, I feel unsafe. My
Mm,
body does genuinely feel unsafe. But on the other end, when nobody is matching what they're doing, they feel unsafe.
yeah.
So there's kind of a fine line with, or I should say more like a gray area with all of this, because a lot of what I've seen in children is that the reason they can't communicate, even with other means of communication, not just verbal,
Hmm.
right? But the reason they can't communicate is not necessarily because of their autism. It has really nothing to do with that. But their reflex system is causing them to be on high alert 90% of the time.
Wow.
So a sound that I'm able to filter out all of the traffic behind me, they're listening to every single car and registering it over and over and over and over again as
Yeah.
potential danger.
Ooh.
And then I'm expecting them to look me in the eye.
Right.
I mean, of course they're not, right? Of course.
Yeah.
So,
Overstimulated, and then it's like, no, calm down enough to look at me. It's like, whoa, no, you don't hear what I hear.
yeah. So that's why the mirror neurons are so powerful, is because when we can kind of, like you said, learn to communicate a little bit better on their level, they feel safe. And we're able to feel safe as well.
Yeah.
And remind ourselves that this is our body doing its best, and your body is doing its best
Hmm.
in a different way.
That just brought up something really interesting to me. That unsafe feeling, right? Because we're not mirroring one another, right? And that's because that takes it back to like a subconscious kind of thing, right? So when we're again in that pattern making part of our brain, which is our subconscious, because it likes to save energy. That's a wall. You're Tara. You're a human. That's a computer in front of me, right? There's a microphone in my face, right? I don't have to like rework the wheel. All this is right here, right? Now, if I want to get detailed about it, yeah, this is a Shure microphone. You have glasses on and a tattoo, so you're a different human than me, blah, 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 right? But if we can look at that idea, like, so if we're talking to a person that has neurodivergence and that subconscious unsafe feeling that I have is matching their unconscious, unsafe feeling that they have, if we can approach the conversation with a little more open heart, a little more consciousness, and the discernment of our own kind of way that our emotions naturally act to when we're conscious of the way that they act, maybe we can start to hold a little more clearer space because your understanding of that now, right? So as we start to educate people as to why there's a discomforting feeling, I don't know why I don't feel comfortable right now, but there's this uncomfortable feeling. Okay, let's educate that so that when somebody can step up with a little more consciousness, a little more awareness to saying, hey, okay, cool. I understand this person is not going to match me. I'm going to try my hardest to make things feel safe so that person can maybe I'll match that person so they can see me and they can feel safe and we can have a better conversation or whatever interaction we're going to have.
Yes, 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 yes.
Mm.
I love that. And one of my favorite therapy techniques that I use in more traditional speech therapy is called reciprocal imitation training. And we use it a lot with our autistic students.
Mm-hmm.
And you literally go around imitating everything that they do, every sound, every movement. And you would be so surprised at how quickly they start side eyeing you for
Yeah.
the first time, acknowledging, wait, what? You're they may not copy you, but they're gonna keep watching you, and eventually they are going to copy you,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's just like we're so concerned with looking like we're making fun of someone or like being weird,
Mm.
right? Being perceived a certain way by other people. What if it was just normal for me to wave at someone that might be neurodivergent. And instead of waving, they make a really high-pitched noise and flap their hands or jump in the air. And then I did something similar back.
Yeah.
What if that was normal and okay? And then I walk about my day and I don't think twice about it, right?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
I mean, we're so concerned with, oh, I don't want to make fun of them. And it's like, well, if that's what makes them comfortable on how to greet,
Mm-hmm.
who am I to say that they have to wave at me?
Yep.
And look at me.
That's so funny you mentioned that, because for a little while, about 3 years before COVID, I was teaching a yoga class for about 15 to 20 neurodivergent kids. They were beautiful. They would walk over from the local high school. They'd be at the yoga studio outside of our time. And we just, I'd put them through like a 30 to 45 minute yoga class, just little basic movements, body awareness, stuff like that. And the very first time I worked with them, and this is my first time working with a group of neurodivergent kids. I've done one-on-one sessions here and there with energy work and stuff, but this is my first group of kids, and abilities are all over the place. There's kids that are walking in on their own. There's kids in wheelchairs, or people that are having to be held in by an adult or somebody, and but they all on their mats, right? And so the very first class, I was like, okay, we're gonna do really basic stuff. I just want to get them body moving. And I started off with cats and cows, right? And so when I did the first cow pose, I drop the belly, lift the chest. And one of the kids goes, moo. And I was like, oh my God. And then all the kids kind of looked at him, because they were kind of looking at me like, I don't know what we're doing here. And then when the kid mooed, we all kind of looked at each other, and then another kid mooed, another kid mooed. I'm like, got it. Okay, cat, meow, cow, moo. And so we went through all the animal yoga poses and did the animal sounds with it. And it was like a light switch flipped. And they were like, everybody went from awkward, weird, we don't know what this guy's doing, we don't trust him, to we're making noise, this is fantastic. And it was such a beautiful moment for me, because I was just kind of beta testing a bunch of shit. I had no idea what was going to work or not. And then to get that response from them, and then saying, oh, cool, meeting you where you're at, right? I'm not going to be like, no, we don't talk during yoga classes. It's like, no, right. You know what? Let's make all the weird sounds we can. Because what does a camel sound like? I have no idea, but we're going to make some sounds that pretend like we know what a camel sounds like, But it's like exactly what you said, it's like meeting them where they're at, instead of forcing them to meet me where I'm at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that must have made them feel in that moment so safe. So safe. And that's when the learning happens, right? Is when our body feels safe.
Yeah.
And that's why so much of us are going around walking, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, we're walking around trying to learn and remember our, what we were supposed to do that day.
Right.
But we're under these chronic levels of stress that are causing our body to feel unsafe. Constantly looking for the next danger, right?
Right.
So that's beautiful that you were able to kind of help them lead a little bit and let them lead.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's, that was a beautiful lesson for me. It's, I'm the adult in there, but I'm the leader of the class, the teacher, but at the same time, we're all students, I love the idea of horizontal, when I was in management, I love the idea of horizontal management, right? I might be the general manager of this place, but we're all in this together. So we're all going to talk about what's going on. We're all going to make decisions together. This is a democracy. This isn't I'm not just up here dictatorship, do what Adam says, let's all talk about this together. And that's led so much beautifully into my yoga practice, my energy work. It's I'm not the holder of the knowledge, right? And that's where I get a lot of issues with the guru idea, or that kind of that I have the knowledge and I will impart the knowledge on you. It's no, we all have our own bits of knowledge, so let's all share this together, because you're going to approach something differently than I am, and that's beautiful, right? So well, I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about your podcast, because it's beautiful and I love what you and Rochelle are doing. So before we kind of close the brackets on MNRI and your beautiful work that you're doing with neurodivergent adults and humans, is there anything else you want to kind of add into that before we kind of pivot?
Yeah, just, with MNRI, the goal is to make your body feel safe so that you can build those new neural pathways from a safe place, and so that you don't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
Life doesn't need to be as hard as we make it.
Damn straight.
And we are constantly understimulated in an overstimulated world.
Wow, that's a good statement.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, right?
Yeah.
Like our bodies, our brain stems, our nervous systems are constantly looking for how we're in danger. Oh my God, I'm going to be late to this meeting. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we build up these stories in our heads because, again, we're just understimulated. Our body, our physical body is just understimulated.
Yeah.
And we have all this information coming at us at all hours of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we could just listen to those safety mechanisms and say, hey, thank you. And I don't need you.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you. And I don't need you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see that you're trying to protect me. I'm safe. And we shouldn't have to do that at a cognitive level. We should allow our bodies to do that work.
Yeah.
The way that it wants to do it. So that is what I would say MNRI is all encompassing of, and why it helps with sleep, anxiety, depression, pain.
All things we all experience now as humans.
Yes.
Unfortunately. Yeah. Well, you're doing amazing work, and thank you for sharing what you're working on and working towards, and continuing to work towards. And that's so beautiful. It's like, where you're at right now and where you'll be even tomorrow, let alone 10 years from now, is going to be just so interesting to see how, the knowledge starts to grow and continues to grow and mesh with all the other cool modalities that you're working with, to find that way that all the cool things that you're passionate about present this cool, like, actualization moment for you in the world. It's like, this is the reason I've just found the reason I'm here right now, to put all this together to help humanity in this beautiful way.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, let's talk about your podcast. So you and Rochelle have been doing Illuminating the Pathways Home for about a year. Has it been about a year yet?
No, not even. It's been a little over 6 months.
All right.
Honestly. Yeah, we hit it really hard in the beginning because we had so much to say, and we were really excited, and kind of got into a flow this last few months of having a guest every month.
Nice.
And our biggest goal is to kind of bridge these conversations of, I have a really heavy neuroscience background, and Rochelle has a really heavy spiritual background. We both have similar stories of leaving our day jobs because of something we strongly believed in was not okay back in October of 2021.
Okay.
So we really connected on that and felt that having these conversations that people are really uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
People are so uncomfortable with disagreeing with one another. And her and I don't always agree. But bringing in both, the neuroscience aspects, the spirituality aspects, and reminding ourselves that what works for me may not work for you. But why not get curious about it, right? And so we talk a lot about different practices. We always have a meditation, or like in one of our podcasts, we had a sacred rage practice that we guided. Rochelle guided it. It was beautiful. It was so raw too. It was just our first take, and we were both just like in it and just feeling it and giving people the permission to just like growl and yell, and it was really fun.
That's beautiful.
And really cathartic, and bringing in some of my somatic practices and then some of her sound healing practices, and just kind of, backing up a lot of what I've been talking about today is how to help the body feel safe without having to think about it so hard.
Yeah.
We don't have to think about it. Therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy and counseling is great. But how many times are you going to talk about that trauma story before you somatically move it through your body?
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're re-traumatizing and re-triggering your body over and over and over, and your reflex system is not going to turn off. Your reflex system is not going to become automatic and fluid until you give the body what it needs.
Right.
And so we have these conversations. We've had some really cool guests. One of my favorite guests is a acting teacher in our community, and he brings a lot of somatic practices into teaching actors how to embody different characters without going Heath Ledger, right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
That's his soul. But, like how to separate yourself enough, but still embodying it and still, somatically feeling it in your body.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. How to shake it off at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I bet God, that's got to be a different take because there's that. I never knew how deep actors got into their roles until, unfortunately, what happened with Heath Ledger. And now seeing people like, unfortunately, oddly enough, it's a similar character, the Joker, but even Joaquin Phoenix playing the more recent Joker. Good Lord, I mean, that guy's a method actor, and just the amount of personalities that man has played and acted through. I would imagine that separation practice has got to be strong. That knowing of oneself and knowing the character that you're playing has got to be very discerning, because that ease to just kind of step into that role and just to be that person, especially once you're acting in that way for so long. And I've seen some of these method actors like on sets and how they don't break character even when the camera's not on them, and they're like talking to their co-actors in that same character, kind of maybe sometimes dickish, sometimes like aggressive. And that learned behavior, right? We're products of learned behavior, and if we're constantly doing that, then we might get stuck in that. So that's a really interesting concept to think about.
Yeah, yeah, and that that duality that we all have within us, that polarity that we all get to kind of play with and balance out and work on and become aware of, I think too, is so just another piece of that.
Yeah.
Being able to feel safe as, I feel safe as the really communicative, polite, kind, expressive human. And I also feel safe as the, cannabis smoking, just weird, quiet, hand gesturing person.
Oh, damn straight. That's a goal right there. That's a goal, and it's just getting past those stories in our head to where we can feel comfortable in our own skins, and not feel like I have to act like the person across from me. Or if I, like you said, if I say hi to you and you flap your hands and chirp at me, and I'm like, cool, maybe I feel comfortable enough to do that back to you and not create a story in my head where I feel awkward about that, Yeah. So with your podcast, you guys plan on continuing to monthly guests and just kind of exploring the different modalities of the humans that you meet out there?
Yeah, yeah. So our next, well, you get to be on our podcast, which
Yes,
we're so excited about. But one of our next guests is our shaman, Jo Beth, and then we also have we're going to have a really special Mother's Day episode about bereaved mothers and just how some different stories and different, I'll let Rochelle speak to that more. That will definitely be more Rochelle's conversation and leader in that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we touched on that subject in our conversation, and that she is a very strong human being for being able to talk as openly as she is about that subject.
Yeah. I agree. And that's really what message we want to convey is having all these raw conversations, and learning how to love all those parts of ourselves and dare I say, have appreciation or just understand compassion
Yeah.
for all those parts of ourselves. And, Rochelle and I are both strong advocates, and we have a lot of pride in that, and we want other people to feel whole just as they are.
Yeah.
And so whatever conversation, whatever words that people don't like hearing, or, controversies people don't like to talk about out of fear of being outcasted, right?
Yeah.
We're having those conversations.
Good. They need to be had. They need to be had. And that's the more people we can have out there having those tough conversations, they stop being tough, they stop being awkward, they start being normal. Like we need to be able to talk about this shit, right? I'm tired of like hiding conversations. Like I think when I finally realized that it was, let's see, I have a 19-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old daughter. And when my 19-year-old was 14, so about 4 or 5 years ago, when she was, reaching puberty, my fiance Monica and I were talking about it, and I'm like, I don't know if I feel comfortable asking my daughter if she's had her period yet, if she started bleeding yet. And when I said that, I'm like, well, why the fuck don't I feel comfortable asking her that? Like, I'm a concerned adult in her life, and I want to make sure that if, when she comes and visits me, like I have all the feminine hygiene products she needs, or I have like, if she needs to take a bath, I got all the stuff that she needs, right? So why do I feel awkward asking my own daughter if she's done something biologically natural for herself?
Yeah.
So I'm like, fuck, man. Okay, cool. Call my daughter and say, hey, it might sound awkward, but have you started your period yet? And there was a little bit of silence on the other end. And then she's like, yeah. I'm like, cool. What do you need from me? What can I get from you? Do you bring stuff with you? Do I need to have stuff here for you? So when my youngest daughter now is 14, we've had that conversation and it doesn't feel awkward. I don't have to feel like an awkward father asking my blood daughter whether or not she's done something that every fucking woman does in a natural way. Right? Why do I feel awkward about that? And it's great because now I don't, and now I have open conversations about menstruation with a lot of my clients, a lot of like yoga students, and we can take that level and that layer of awkwardness away from it. I'm just trying to find the most information to help you in the journey that you're on. I'm not trying to be prying and be like, oh, did you bleed today? It's like, no. If like, okay, so an example for this would be yoga and people that are women that have recently given birth, right? So up until 6 months after you breastfeed, you're done breastfeeding, your body still releases this hormone called relaxin. And relaxin is made to help your joints expand during pregnancy. So your hips can open up and you can birth the child. Now that hormone is regularly in our system for our women's system if they're breastfeeding until 6 months after they're done breastfeeding. So your joints are really slippery. If you hop into a hot yoga class and I say, hey, how are you? I just had a baby. Cool. I'm going to ask you a personal question. I hope I don't offend you. Are you breastfeeding? Yes, you are. Okay, cool. Here's the information that I have. Boom. That's all I need, right? I just want to share the information that I have so you stay safe in what you're doing. And I know that I've done my best to educate you on what I know. Right. Yeah. And that could be an awkward conversation. And it was the first couple of times I was like, oh, should I ask this? It's like, maybe write it on a piece of paper and slide it across. It's like, no, hey, right. I'm a human. You're a human. I'm going to try to help you out. Is this awkward? Can I ask you this question? If not, cool. You have the ability to say, no, I'm not going to pry. But if you're open enough to answer the question, I'm going to share the knowledge that I have.
Yeah. I love that. It's so interesting. Again, going back to mirror neurons. That is why the awkwardness that we feel shows on our body. And without that other person knowing, they are going to feel awkward. They can see their mirror neurons are firing and telling their vagus nerve, this person doesn't feel very comfortable asking this question. Well, I don't feel very comfortable answering this question.
Right. That's beautiful. I mean, to that point, the more I've asked those questions, the more confident I've gotten. And, the more tactful, right? The first time it's like, are you breastfeeding? Like, whoa, shit. Oh. It's like, can I ask you a question?
Hi, nice to meet you.
But I mean, to that point, you're like, the more comfortable I get asking the questions, it just becomes a question instead of like looking around. You're like, who's around? Should I wait a minute? It's like you're about to tell some like off-color joke or something. It's like, no, like, hey, right here, we're going to talk. Cool. All right. There we go. Now that's done. We can just go on about our lives.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well,
Love it.
Tara, you're an amazing human being, and I'm deeply grateful to share the space with you and to hear your wisdom and your knowledge, to see what you're working on, and to just feel the passion that you have. And that's what we need. And the more I talk to people like you, the more I'm driven by that passion. So those mirror neurons are working, right? You're passionate, you're making me passionate, right? So it's working in a good way. But thank
Yes.
you for what you do. Thank you for contributing to humanity in the way that you do, and just everything that you're working towards and working on. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you so much for those words, and I receive them in full. And thank you for the work that you're doing out
Mm,
there, Adam. You are an incredible human, and I can't wait for the day that I get to experience sound healing with you sometime in the very near future.
definitely, definitely. We will be back in Spokane at the latest in July, but probably before then.
Perfect.
All right, love. Well, thank you so much. You have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too, Adam. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for spending time with Tara and I. Please check out the show notes for links to get in touch with Tara in any kind of aspect. Also, ways to support the show.